Hello, this is Kristen. Welcome back to my series on alcohol and alcohol problems. And today I wanted to address one of the comments that was asking if I thought that some people just become alcoholic and others don't, or is it that alcohol is a highly addictive substance in itself and it just required the right circumstances to cause someone to start to really have this problem. And I think it's both. AA um, has the idea that someone could have what they call an allergy to alcohol. I want to say this is more of a metaphorical way of speaking about it. It's not technically and medically an allergy that someone has. But the idea is, I believe, in AA, that when someone who has this allergy drinks alcohol, they have an unusual reaction to alcohol. It could cause them to feel differently than other people who do not have that quote unquote allergy. Perhaps alcohol energizes a person. That would be an unusual reaction if it was sustained anyway. I think alcohol can, I believe it first has like a stimulating effect, but then it goes into, it's more of a depressant and it's more of a sedative. Um, After maybe someone does have that little initial boost of energy. But the other aspect that AA talks about is that phenomenon of craving, which would be in someone who, after they consume alcohol, they have the experience of having an urge to drink more. And I believe that in the literature of AA, it says if a person sometimes, so maybe it doesn't need to be all the time that the person has the phenomenon of craving where they want more after they've already consumed alcohol. It could just happen sometimes, and that would be enough for a person to start to be urged to consider whether they may or may not consider themselves to be an alcoholic. At the same time, the medical model um, takes the view that, and it's scientifically the case, that alcohol is a substance that behaves a certain way physiologically in a human body. And it is very strong. It is very powerful. It's so strong that if you drink too much at one given time, you could die if your body didn't have time to compensate for that going in. If your body didn't, cause you to vomit, for instance, you could get alcohol poisoning and die. It's powerful, and it has the same effects on everyone, but perhaps there are differences in that it might take a lot less for me than it takes for someone else who's perhaps bigger, um, who may have a high tolerance for alcohol. But in essence, it's a substance that causes certain physiological changes in a human body, any human body, and it's going to behave the same way in everyone. And I believe that even if I'm someone who does not have some of those features that I spoke of that AA talks about, where my body reacts unusually to alcohol and or I have the phenomenon of craving, I believe that because alcohol is so powerful, that I could become alcoholic by simply drinking on a regular basis, increasing the amount I'm drinking, which I would have to do if I became dependent upon the effects of alcohol. At first, emotionally, psychologically, if I developed that dependence on alcohol to help me feel differently than I feel, over time, if I continued that and I did not stop that, I would then become an alcoholic. I would develop alcohol use disorder, according to the medical way of saying it. I'm not of the belief that we are necessarily born one way or the other. I don't believe that. I do believe that some people are certainly more vulnerable to it. And I'm not even speaking genetically. I don't even like to really talk about genetics because environment and experience play such a huge role in the development of anything like this that I just don't think it's helpful or useful to speak about in that way. Uh, that might just be a personal thing, a little peeve that I have about uh, the way in which we could kind of oversimplify genetics and inheriting, you know, something like this. I think it's fine enough to acknowledge, like the next commenter had talked about underlying mental health issues. Yeah, absolutely. If there's an unresolved trauma history, if a person is always feeling stressed, anxious, and in tension all the time, perhaps their beliefs about themselves were uh, caused to be quite negative. Perhaps there's really low or no self-esteem. That person would be more vulnerable to all sorts of addictions. And if alcohol provided a satisfying effect for them, then they would be more likely to perhaps uh, get in trouble with alcohol as time went on, as they became more attached to it, more dependent upon it, first emotionally and psychologically, of course, but then over time, if left unchecked, it will turn into the physical dependence. I think alcohol is something to have a very healthy respect and fear of because of it can be a very slow process that a person isn't even aware is happening over years, making these subtle changes in how they feel, where they're not going to necessarily pinpoint that the changes that they're feeling, why they're so anxious or stressed all the time, actually was due to the worsening of that over time because of the intake of alcohol and the changes that the brain and the nervous system had to make to compensate for that alcohol going in. So then when they're not drinking and they're feeling on edge and they're feeling more irritable in general in life, they're not necessarily going to, and I don't think most people do, identify that the source of that increase in irritability came from the past 10 years of drinking alcohol. No, they're going to point to circumstances in their life. They're going to point to feelings they may have, memories they may have. They may regurgitate that and then say, I feel more agitated, more stressed because of these things that happened to me and also these circumstances that are happening to me now. Let me drink. Right? So I have a very healthy fear of alcohol, and I think everyone should. It's like playing with something very dangerous. And it's very sneaky. It's very sneaky because a person's thinking starts to evolve and change, and they don't see it as being sourced from the process of all the changes that are taking place physiologically. They are thinking that they are thinking that way. And that's not what's happening a lot of times. And so, yes, I think it's a both. It's both that some people will become alcoholic because they're vulnerable to it. It could even be, um, they might not even see themselves that way, but there may be, I think a lot of times, even if someone doesn't consider themselves to have problems with depression or anxiety, they may have feelings about themselves, beliefs about life that could cause them to be more vulnerable to developing a problem with alcohol. And also, I believe that even people who have no mental health issues, uh, or they're they have them well in hand, they're doing well in life, or they're relatively content with life, they too could be vulnerable if they were to drink enough, regularly enough, and develop that emotional dependence upon it. Because now they're going to be on that progressive road of this disease, because the changes are happening, and then more changes are going to happen, and then we could have some significant problems that take place in a person's life. Because, of course, we can talk about everything that's going on internally in someone as things are progressing with the problem, but alongside of that, or with that, are the many, many problems, chaos, um, terrible things that happen as a result of the problem. Because as a person drinks, becomes inebriated, they are no longer in their right mind, and anything can happen on any given occasion. And a lot of times, those occasions happen, and it isn't enough to get the person to be willing to put alcohol away or out of their lives. And then what ends up being the case is the person tries to find ways to drink in a more moderate way. And that struggle can go on for years, and there can be all kinds of other incidents, problems, disasters, losses, health problems. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question. And I hope this was helpful in some way. And thank you so much for watching.